going to be a very, very mamma mia, hola, si senor, interesting show. Because we're talking about something that is shocking to me, and it's hard to shock me. Is the earth round or is it flat? I have two experts here today to debate that issue. On my right, I have with me Mark Sargent. Mark, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And what were you doing prior to become a flat? He's a flat earther.
I am. It's true.
Prior to becoming a flat earther, what type of work? You worked in software?
I did. I taught proprietary software for 20 years. And before that, I played video games for a living.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And on my, well, that's on my right. And on my left, I have with me Dr. Jeff. And his last name, I would never be able to pronounce it. Dr. Jeff, what's your last name?
Zwerin.
Zwerin. Are you Jewish?
No.
How do you get to be swearing?
Not swearing, Zwerin.
What is that? Are you?
It's Dutch.
Oh, okay. Welcome, man.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And so you are a Christian.
I am a Christian.
And what type of work you did before you became a Christian?
Well, I became a Christian when I was pretty young, so most of my work has been as a Christian. But I do work at UCLA. I work as a research faculty there. I do research on high-energy astrophysics stuff. I also work at Reasons to Believe, talking about how science and Christianity work together.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for coming, man.
Glad to be here.
I told them I'm happy to have both of you here because I have no idea how this flat earth thing came about. And so, Mark, you're like one of the leading people in this whole flat earth idea, right?
Yeah.
Have you always believed that the earth was flat?
No, not at all.
At one point, you believed that it was round.
We don't even say round. We say globe or ball or sphere, because technically a dinner plate is round, a dining room table is round. But yes, I was in the globe camp all the way up until the middle of 2014.
And what got your attention to for you to start believing that the earth is flat?
Some really odd YouTube videos that talked about flight routes in the southern hemisphere that really caught my attention, and then I researched it for about 9 months just because I tried to debunk it. Nobody goes into flat earth loving it right away. They all hate it. They think it's a horrible, horrible idea. And after 9 months, I said, you know what, I'm going to put a series of videos on YouTube and I'm going to say, all right, somebody shoot me down, somebody in academia, and I called it the Flat Earth Clues, and everything started taking off.
But you start to believe this by playing video games first. You saw it in the video games.
I also saw it in the games, but it didn't. I was into simulations and simulation theory, like the movie The Matrix or the 13th Floor and stuff like that. But it never occurred to me that it was flat, even though all simulations are flat. And then, yeah, when it went hand in hand. So when I looked at flat Earth, it's like I looked at it from a technical, if I was going to build it from a simulation point of view, and everything worked really nicely.
Are you 100% sure the Earth is flat?
I am now. I wasn't 4 months into it. At the beginning of 2015 when I made the series, I wasn't, but it's been running now since then really heavily, and there's so many people involved with so many facets I hadn't even looked at, that yeah, we're living, it's not just flat, you're living in a building. No different than this, a giant stage with walls and a floor and a ceiling.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you smoke pot?
I don't. I don't, but that's a good question.
And so, Dr. Jeff, you believe the Earth is round.
I do, yes.
And are you 100% sure the Earth is round?
To the best I can measure it, yes.
You don't believe it's flat at all?
I do not, no.
When did you hear that the Earth was flat? And what was your first impression when you heard it?
I guess the first time I heard it, I mean, you know, I hear lots of things, and so I was like, oh, kind of interesting. I don't know why somebody would think that, so I've kind of looked at it a little bit. And what I find interesting, if I'm honest about it, when you first start looking at some of the things, the evidence they put out is kind of compelling and hard to wrestle with at some of it. And but as I've looked through certain key places or places where they say, okay, this is evidence of flat, as I've dug into the details, I find it not so convincing after I've looked at some more of the details.
What's not convincing about it?
Well, I think one of the things that I have yet to hear is, you know, we talk about, you know, being able, whether you can see curvature around, and, you know, if I could refer to, you sent me a video a couple of days ago, and you make a comment in there that you're on Whidbey Island looking over at Seattle, and you say, oh, we shouldn't be able to see Seattle because there ought to be hundreds of miles of curvature, or hundreds of feet of curvature. I'll be right there, hundreds of feet of curvature. And so I just sat down and did some calculations, and according to my calculations, that should be about 70, maybe 80 feet or less. And so the fact that you can see Seattle actually fits very comfortably within what I would expect in there. But I think, to me, the biggest reason why I think the globe is, or why we live on a globe, the Earth is a globe, is that when I look at how things work, you know, I'm an astronomer, so I get to study what's going on in space. I'm also a physicist, so I study how instruments work here. And when we look at gravity, let's just say that, because that's very different in how a young or a flat Earth and a globe Earth could be very different. Yeah. But what I find interesting is that when you go and make measurements in the lab of how does gravity work, it works out a certain way. And when I then apply that to how moons orbit around Jupiter, which we can see them being spherical in nature, and when I look out at distant galaxies and how stars rotate around galaxies, that one formulation of gravity explains all of that data without seams, even here on Earth. And so to me, just the most natural thing is, if it works everywhere else, why would we expect this to be any different?
And you say?
I'm saying that if we were in a giant planetarium, as it were, you know, you see the same things you're talking about. You see a moon, and you see planets, and you see stars. They're just objects in the sky. They're just lights. They're just part of a giant projection system. You can make them do whatever you want. And yes, I know you say, well, they all look spherical, but we're the only things that's flat. It's like, no, you're in a building, and everything you see isn't what you think it is. So gravity, and by the way, to your point of gravity, gravity is, you know, you say it's a magical molecular magnetic force that pulls things down to the center of a sphere.
No, I don't say that.
Well, okay, most mainstream science. I mean, even the most public of mainstream science, Neil deGrasse Tyson, even he says, no, we can't tell you what gravity is. We can only tell you what it does. We can only tell you the symptoms of it. And so they say, oh yeah, it's a force that pulls things down to the center of a globe. And we say, well, it's a force that pulls things down to, you know, a flat surface. And let me clarify here, because there's some people who are going to say, you know, what is the flat Earth? And would you mind, Kelly? Can I see the models real quick? You know, we're shown this when we're 6 years old, and this is the ball, and it's
that's the Earth, the round Earth.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Spherical Earth spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, going around the sun at 50, 60,000 miles an hour, and the whole solar system is going sideways at 500,000 miles an hour, and so on and so on. What's interesting, though, is, and this would be more or less a representation of the flat Earth, a self-contained system roughly the same size. But here's the big difference. This can't exist on its own. It uses a huge support system to survive, meaning you need a sun and a solar system and a galaxy and a universe around it, where this needs nothing. This is just, you know, if you look inside it, there's your world. So the question is, why couldn't that be possible? In fact, if it's easier to understand, which is why it's been catching on as fast as it has, if this is easier to understand than this, because this takes huge amounts of math, geometry and trig and calculus and quantum mechanics and everything you specialize in, why wouldn't people be attracted to this?
Well, and it may be, and I'll say straight off the top, I can't prove the Earth is not flat. In the sense that if we're talking prove 100% equivocally, there's no way I can get around. I mean, I've listened to what you say.
Sure.
And you provide a case for a flat Earth.
Right.
So to the extent someone can provide a case for a flat Earth, I can't prove that it's 100% wrong.
Right.
Now, this is the challenge I have, or why I wrestle strongly with it, is that one, there's a lot of data that personally I have, as well as scientifically I have, that just points to the Earth being round. I mean, there's, you know, I would say, you know, we've got pictures from going to the moon, and I know you dispute all of that. And so we're talking about various things there. But there's a lot of things that the simplest explanation is that we're actually on a globe. Now, as I've listened to you and as I've thought about it, in order for the Earth to be flat, you know, there are some measurements we could make here that we could dabble with, but there needs to be some very high level of conspiracy conspiring against us to make all of that true. And you've admitted you're a conspiracy.
No, I am a conspiracy guy. Oh yeah, I love them.
And so you've admitted there's some high level of conspiracy.
Yeah.
Just in the people I've worked with, I find it very hard to have that level of conspiracy that holds together coherently.
Got it.
I've tried to have parties for people, and it's very hard, even for a short period of time, to keep the party quiet.
Sure.
And those are people who really want it to happen. So I just struggle, you know, to have a global conspiracy of that level is hard. But even deeper, and this is, you know, coming at it from a Christian, I find something more troubling, is that if indeed that we live on a flat Earth, that the Creator or whoever's put this in place has done things in a way to hide reality.
Sure.
And I could deal with humans are weird, humans are evil, humans want to hide things, I can do that. A creator who both wants to know us but hides himself at that level is really difficult for me to wrap my mind around.
I have heard this before, and that is, are you saying that God is being deceptive? Because if God is all good and all powerful, can he also be deceptive in this case? Would he be, is it a trick? Because, if it's a trick, we're talking about somebody else. And I would respond with, well, what if it's not a trick or a deception, but a test, like a puzzle to be solved more than anything else? It's something, and let me answer your first part, which is, can a conspiracy be this big? I'm not saying, like, for example, 99% of the NASA people that work there that turn the wrenches and build the fuel systems and build the capsules and everything, they wouldn't have to be in on it. Only the telemetry guys would have to be in on it. And that would be the same with any space agency.
See, the problem I have with that is that I have one of my respected spiritual mentors is one of the telemetry guys. And so for me to have this guy who's a guide for me to understand and live the Christian life also be involved in a conspiracy, that's a pretty hard thing for me to swallow.
I hear you. I absolutely hear you. Look, I had a chance to speak with astronaut Terry Virts during a thing in London. And somebody asked me, it's like, are you calling Terry Virts a liar? And I'm going, look, he's a colonel in the United States military. He follows, it's a full bird colonel. He follows orders and he does what he's told, even if he objects to whatever is happening there. Now, I can't speak for your friend. I don't know what aspect of telemetry he's in, but yes.
He works at flight navigation throughout the solar system. How do we communicate with satellites that are out there? He's very heavy into that.
He would be very close to.
Let me ask you something about your flat Earth thing.
Yeah.
So are you saying that the Earth is in here and we're surrounded with this?
It's almost, yeah.
And so the Earth is in there.
Yep.
And are we in there too?
Yes, everything's in there. The sun.
So we're not on the outside of this.
There doesn't have to be anything on the outside of this. That's the other thing which is so hard for people to break out, and that is there doesn't have to be space. A lot of people say, well, is that just floating in space? And it's like, well, who says there has to be space? Because if space is simulated in there, like it is in a planetarium, there doesn't have to be anything outside. I mean, it could be, biblical side, could be God's footstool.
So you're saying that this is not floating in space somewhere?
No, it could be.
Somewhere?
But
is that ice around the edge of the Earth? On the inside? Oh.
On the inside, the Antarctic coastline is the only continent that would not look anything like this. That is, Antarctica will be stretched around the entire outer edge. But the Antarctic coastline wouldn't be the edge of the world. There would be no cosmic waterfall. It would still go in thousands of miles. And again, that's what Admiral Byrd, the youngest admiral in the history of the Navy, he explored for the last 30 years of his career, from 1928 until his death in 1956, 1957. Where he explored Antarctica, and then finally they locked it down. But I got to address something real quick, because again, I know we have a ton of time, which is the biblical side of things. Because I read up in your biography, and I like it. I love the fact that you're trying to mesh in some way, shape, or form, science with religion. I think it's a lofty goal. Don't know if it's going to happen. But I know it's a great goal. I mean, you and I are on the same page with some of the stuff.
Are you a Christian?
I am a Christian.
And you believe in God?
Absolutely, I believe in God. In fact, one of the default things of believing in this is that it was created. Default. If you believe that the world was created, in the shape of a soundstage, then it was built by someone. And then you only have two choices. It's like, okay, well, an advanced civilization that we don't know about, or the divine. And really, at that point, you're just splitting hairs. But there's some biblical stories which work so much better with this than it does with this. For example, and I'm not going to quote chapter or verse exactly, the story of Joshua, when he asked to hold the sun, God to hold the sun and the moon in the sky for an extra day so he could slay more enemies, right? So much tougher to do in a heliocentric model, because you have to stop the Earth, you have to stop the solar system, and everything around it. I mean, you have to stop it.
No, you don't.
Stop the rotation of the Earth.
No, you don't.
To stop the sun and the moon in a heliocentric model?
You have to realize there's a description of what they see in the sky. There are phenomena that make it look that way. There are phenomena that make it look that way.
My point. And that is, if you're just talking about phenomena in the sky, it's much easier to hit pause on this than his pause on this. And one more thing, well, if we're going down that road, how about the Tower of Babel? That's one of my favorites. That is a bridge to heaven, right? Big tower going up there. Well, where's it going if it's on a spinning ball that's spinning this way, and going sideways in all these directions? That tower's going nowhere. Build a tower in here, you know exactly where it's going. Build a tower in here, you know exactly where it's going. The biblical model, and I'm on your side in a lot of ways. The Bible is a flat earth book, in our opinion. There's only one chapter and verse that even comes close, and that's Isaiah 40:22, which says, "He who sitteth upon the circle of the earth." Again, circle's not ball, it's not globe, it's not sphere, it's circle. That's a circle.
You say?
I would say the Bible is largely silent on what the shape of the earth is, because one, most people throughout the history of Earth wouldn't know what it was.
Right.
And it's only in fairly recent times that we've been able to do that. So, in this sense, if we were to find out at the end of the day that the earth is flat, it wouldn't really bother me. There's nothing about biblically that would, one way or the other, bother me with that.
Oh, no, and
what I would go back to is the fact that I do find a coherence in the way God sustains creation. And the fact that I can see, as we're studying what's going on out in the cosmos, is so consistent with what we see here. That fits very well with a God who's the creator of everything. How that is, we're studying what actually happens here on Earth, and that I can drop balls, those sorts of things. Right. Whereas what's going on out there is not. That seems a little incoherent for a God, again, who wants us to know him.
And I hear you. I would respond with God, because people are saying, are you saying that, because I say you don't have to have a solar system or a galaxy or a universe. Even Carl Sagan said there's an awful lot of wasted space that doesn't seem to be doing anything, and I know we can get into dark matter and dark energy, but let's not.
Well, I think you can make an argument that the universe needs to be the way it is for life to be here.
Potentially.
In the universe.
Potentially, but at the same time, I would also say that God's more efficient than that. So I'm not saying that God's lazy. He's like, why? Well, God can make everything, including a giant solar system. It would be effortless. It's going, yeah, but God's also really efficient. And that is, if 99.99% of the population believe the world that is presented to them, stars and the planets are whatever they are told, even though I believe there's signs and wonders in a giant clock system, does that clock system have to be millions of light years away? Can't it be close and intimate and made just for you? We've had a lot.
Are there other planets inside of your flat Earth?
Well, yes, but they're not something you can land on. They literally would be like planets in a planetarium. They would be lights in the sky.
So would Jupiter actually exist, or is it one of those things that is just projected up onto the dome?
Yes, it would just be a projection.
Okay.
Again, Jupiter in this would be no different than Jupiter in a planetarium. And I've had people, amateur astronomers, who have said, I've seen the moons of Jupiter in in my telescope. And I say, fine, take a pair of binoculars, go to a planetarium, look at Jupiter. Does it look more or less real with your binoculars? They say, well, we're in a building. I go, yeah, but who's to say when you walked out of that building, you're just not in another building? And sorry, one more thing I got to mention, which is, I can't begin to tell you, and I don't know if this appeals to one side or not, the amount of people that have been brought back to spirituality. I was away. I mean, I was raised born again Christian, vacation Bible school, summer camp, Camp Malibu, all that fun stuff. I was really into it, but when I got into tech and software, like a lot of people, we fall away. When I got into Flat Earth, I snapped right back into spirituality. And I cannot tell you the wave of people that have gotten into this. At least half of our members are really, really strong Christians because of the default thing, and that is, if it was built, there was a creator.
Inside of your flat Earth, there are other planets, right?
Planets that you can't land on.
Are they spinning, or are they just sitting flat too?
It's hard to say. I mean, I don't know what exactly they are up there, other than their lights. I mean, look, we didn't even have HD televisions 20 years ago. So what projection system they're using, I have no idea, other than you can't land on them, you cannot go there.
This thing about flat Earth is not a new idea. A long time ago, years ago, they thought that the Earth was flat. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, well, in some sense, it really makes a lot of sense, because
it makes sense
you go out and look, well,
back then,
the Earth is a pretty big place, and for you to see and actually measure the effects of it, it's a pretty sizable place. For you to measure the effects of it, you got to cover a lot of area. So, I mean, things look flat to a first approximation.
And so, in the older days, they said the Earth was flat. Then they realized that it's round. What caused them to believe that the Earth is round and not flat?
You know, I'd have to go back and look at the history of it. I do know that at least a fair bit of that discussion is we're looking out and seeing these other bodies out in the heavens, where you can see Venus rotate on its axis, you can see Mars rotate on its axis, you can see Jupiter rotate on its axis, you can see the sun rotate on its axis. If we fit within that system of things, it's kind of natural for us to think we rotate on an axis.
So you believe it's a conspiracy that we went to the moon?
Oh, good Lord, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
You think that's a conspiracy?
Yeah, that's the tip of the iceberg there, and that is not, it's way bigger than that. What I'm saying is the only reason we have space programs at all is to keep this thing going as long as possible. I mean, they discovered it in 1960, and they said they figured out it was a real risk to civilization as we know it. They were afraid of what might happen. And so they said, okay, 1958, NASA was formed, and they militarized space.
The astronauts who have gone up there and walked around, and we saw them walking around, were they walking on flat Earth or round Earth?
They were walking on a soundstage in an Air Force base somewhere.
Are you serious?
Oh, absolutely.
You believe that?
I don't. I just find it hard that many people are that unethical. You know, I mean, especially when you go back and you look at Neil Armstrong as he's, and the astronauts that are going there, and they're talking about Scripture and seeing God's majesty in creation, to then come back and say, oh, I've got to lie about this. That's inconsistent with Christian character.
I agree. But at the same time, look, they were military. I mean, one of the Apollo astronauts was a lieutenant general. I felt bad for Neil. Neil became a recluse after it was all over. He drank and just did not make any public appearances. I think all the Apollo astronauts, which is why the guys now, you know, they signed the disclosure agreements and they don't have to do anything. I think the Apollo astronauts wanted to be heroes. And like the movie Capricorn 1, they were told at the last minute, okay, we're not doing this. Here's why. You follow the script, you do it, you signed up for it, you signed the disclosure agreement, and that's it.